So I've gone through all my video footage and photos that I've taken when I was in Egypt, and I found all of the hieroglyphs and symbols that I thought looked very interesting. It looks like maybe the sun or a planet with many moons. I saw this in a couple of different places, and it stunned me the first time I saw it because initially I thought it was an arm with wings. I really love this one because it looks like a trident that's balancing a pine cone on a tray on top of it. This grabbed my attention because clearly it's part of some bigger story, and the things that look like baseball bats, they must have some significance. I know that this is supposed to be the body of a scarab, but it so much looks like a keyhole. Silly, I know, but to me this looks like a cactus wearing a hat. I'd love to know what this one is all about, because it's like something is being tossed, or maybe it's water. Who thinks this is a representation of the Sphinx? And who thinks it's just a lion? So this one is a snake that's doubling back on itself, and it's right next to a couple of other very interesting looking symbols. This one's getting more into the territory of things that are meaningful to me from my dream regressions. And here's another one, very similar, with just a different companion symbol. I felt like I'd hit the jackpot when I kept coming across these symbols of what looks like a person with a large block in the air. So I think this is more for entertainment purposes, because when I saw this, I just thought to myself, you know, the way people use that old saying, oh, I'd give an arm and a leg for one of those. Okay, what I see here is a snake, a ball with a rod through it, and another ball to one side. Another one, absolutely no idea. The balls underneath each of the gods seem to be going through various stages. So is this supposed to be a flying ram? This one's kind of cutesy, but I really would like to know why the Sphinx is sitting on a crocodile tail. Well, I just don't know where to start on this one. This is so beautiful in its simplicity, but because it's such a simple drawing, it's hard to tell if it's a Sphinx or an Anubis or what it actually is. Are these pyramids or are they something else? There's only 2 of them. I think this one speaks for itself. I'm sure you know what I'm thinking. And as for this one, of course I don't think those are sunglasses. It's just interesting that they do look a bit like sunglasses. But it's the face below it that I find really interesting. I didn't really know what to make of this one either. So that's just my imagination running wild. And then of course there's a series of bird ones. And they're all a little bit odd. And now we venture into the land of surrealism. This is quite meaningful to me because I can see elements of what could have been things from the past in my dream regressions, but you know, just on the surface of it, it just doesn't really make any sense. When I first saw these in a museum, I thought, well, that can't possibly be Egyptian, that looks more Sumerian. But when I had a really close look, I could see that some of the symbols were actually Egyptian. I'm leaning towards some kind of boat in this one. I'm not going to actually say anything about this one. I'm just going to let it play and give you a little bit of time to look at it and see what you make of it. And then there's a whole series of the sorts of things that I really don't know what to make of them. So I am just going to let them play out and you can have a look. The obvious answer to this one is some kind of insect. But the more you look at it, the more you think, no, this can't be an insect. And then if you look at it as if it's upside down, well, not upside down, but round the wrong way, then you start to think, gosh, that looks more like a vehicle, a flying machine. These are just a couple of vaguely interesting ones, with the lion head and a few interesting looking symbols. And then we get into this really, really complicated looking one. The far top right is very meaningful to me. It's clearly something that I have seen before, and it looks to me like machinery. But this is the one that I got really, really excited about. It's pretty obvious to me what it is, and it's definitely a representation of things that I have seen in my dream regressions. To me, this is a rather pot-bellied gentleman using some extremely complicated measuring equipment. I just couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this one. The reason this stood out for me was because I'd had a very detailed dream of a piece of equipment that looked so much like this that it was freaky for me. The piece of equipment was, however, encased in what looked like glass. This wasn't, but other than that, the similarity was very, very unbelievable. Now we'll move on to something that is a lot more familiar to everyone who's interested in this subject, and that's what's commonly referred to as the Dendera light bulbs. And these are down in a dingy, dark crypt area in the temple, so they're not easy to get to, but the symbology of these things, according to the Egyptologists, is quite different to what you actually see with your own eyes. And I have seen, once again, similar things in my dreams, but they were actually statues, and the statues held a lighting device. But there was nothing overly exciting about this other than the fact that it was literally a lighting device on a very, very large statue. I saw many examples in different eras of statues of statues. This one's a good example. It's a statue of a man holding a statue of Osiris. These are just a couple of weird-looking symbols. I just love this symbol because to me it looks like a twirly moustache, and that's the only reason I've included it, because it kind of made me have a little giggle, and I just think it's a delightful symbol. I imagine this is some kind of symbolic knot. It also looks like something that you see in the middle of the sistrums. To me, this is a very specific kind of measuring device. I found this interesting because it reminds me of a device that I have actually seen in my dream regressions, but also because of the regularity with which I saw some very similar sorts of symbols wherever I went in Egypt. And so here is another one, and it makes you think, well, is this supposed to be a mirror or a globe, or maybe a crystal ball too? But from my perspective, it is just a scientific device. So back to ones that a lot of you will already be familiar with. These are the Abidos Cliffs, And they're particularly interesting because they look like things like a helicopter, a tank, a UFO, a vehicle like a hovercraft. And when you look at them, it really does look like that. The Egyptologists say that these are combinations of hieroglyphs, and when you do your research and you look them up, the combinations that they say they are do match identically. But why would they do a combination of two glyphs? That's very intriguing, because that the Egyptologists say that part of the glyph that was being replaced had fallen away. But it certainly doesn't look like any part of it's fallen away. It looks very intentional that those two glyphs have been put together. So from that perspective, I'm suspicious. But at the same time, what the Egyptologists say does make a lot of sense, because when you look at those two glyphs, they do match if you put them together. And much as this does seem quite fascinating, from my perspective, there's really only one of these symbols that looks anything like anything I've seen in my dream regressions. So this next picture is the only one that is a very good representation of what I've actually seen in my dream regressions. However, as I was going through all the various sites in Egypt, I actually saw some of these symbols again, but not the one I was actually familiar with from my dream regressions. Anyway, here's one which looks to me exactly the same as the one that is supposed to be a hovercraft, and another one that looks very much like a plane, and another one that looks like a tank. But throughout all the ones that I found that match, I didn't find one that looked like the one that was meaningful to me. I did, however, find things that looked like cars and other various bits of equipment of modern day, but nothing that was the same as the one that I saw from my dreams. And this next one that's circled looks like an upside-down Ankh with a sausage on the end of it, like it was going to be a toasted sausage on a fire. I don't know. It just looks weird. I don't even know where to begin with this next one. First glimpse, it looks like a kangaroo. I like this one for many different reasons, though, because you've got the staff, and he's holding it in a way that looks like he's got to keep control of it, like it's moving, like it's a real snake with a weird head on top of it. But the strangeness doesn't stop there. You just have to look very carefully at this picture. Now you'll see that he's wearing a perfectly normal kind of skirt attire, and that's fine, but just look up from his bare belly and you'll see that there's a strap across his middle, and that's all you see is just a single strap. Then look up a little bit further to his face and you will see that he's got some kind of device attached to his facial area, like as if it is a microphone or something of that kind. Unusual, but I have nothing. This means nothing to me. This is just one weird symbol that I just thought I'd take a photo of because it's so strange. The Jed, the Ankh, and the Was. Love these symbols because every single one of these I have had in my dream regressions. But what intrigues me is the way that the ancient Egyptians would put these into such different combinations. Sometimes they'd have the Was with little arms sticking out holding Jeds and Ankhs, but quite often these three symbols were kept together. And I know the symbolic meaning of them from the perspective of the ancient Egyptians, but the actual symbol itself and where they got the symbol before they gave their own meaning to it is what intrigues me, because to me they are very good representations of things that I've seen in my dream regressions. This photo is actually from Abidos as well, the same as some of the technology symbols that we've discussed already. And I thought to myself, I've seen that before somewhere, and it kind of played on my mind. And then I saw it in lots of other places, and I kept seeing it over and over in different places. And then I realized that it was something I had seen about certain things that happen in the upper atmosphere. And so it's just too similar. And it really played on my brain until I worked it out. Isn't this a beautiful one? The two snakes twirled around with bits of them dangling down underneath this stand or whatever it is supposed to be. But it's a real stunner. Then you see on the pole holding it up one of those things that I refer to as a wand of Horus that had been somehow changed with time and had become a little bent. But this does make me wonder, is there more to it? Is there something that I don't know? If you look at the pictures I have of the items, it's pretty obvious that it is the same item. It's just one is being held in the hand and the other is somehow inserted into a rod. Here's one I have no idea over. Is it a mummified, you know what? Another sort of mysterious looking one. I think that all these next ones are replicas or representations of things from a previous time. And I say that because all of these I have seen in my dream regressions. And I'm not going to discuss them in detail at this point because I think that these items are worthy of their own detailed explanations, especially this one. I saw this one in the Cairo Museum. It's supposed to be a sacrificial table, but seriously? Look at it. Just look at it. It's an exact representation of a very complicated piece of equipment, and doesn't take much imagination to realize that. This one, I believe, is supposed to be some kind of weird system, but turn it upside down and then imagine half of it buried and then use your imagination. This next one is supposed to be of a temple, but it is such an excellent representation of something that I've already seen in my dream regressions that I think it warrants a whole episode in its own right. So this is a comb in one of the museums, and it had some really weird looking stuff on it. There's the obvious things, like there's a vase on the left and almost a mirrored version on the right hand side, and there's some wings in the middle, and underneath the wings there's a bird. But it's what's above the wings that is the most intriguing, because it looks like it's an arm with lots of bangles, but there's no hand at the end of the arm. It seems to be the sort of piece where everybody who looks at it sees something different. This one was quite freaky because of the eyes. The other thing that's kind of weird about it is it's all in proportion, but the hands are tiny. And I think it's supposed to be a pharaoh. But if it's a pharaoh, it's a somewhat lizard-like looking pharaoh. This one grabbed my attention in Alexandria. It's interesting to me because I've seen something almost identical in Persepolis. And the cute thing about the one in Persepolis is the shadow that it casts is the shadow of a really adorable cat. And I was wondering if this one did the same thing. This is a real mix and match. It looks like there's a body of a leopard with some maybe camel legs and a turkey's face wearing a pharaoh's wig and wings. So it doesn't get too much more weird than that, really. One of the temples I went to was covered in this cute little creature. It kind of looks a bit like an insect, but it also looks a bit like a bird. And it's got human hands. So it's a weird little beastie. Okay, so this is a cow with a person growing out of the top of its head. Symbolically, apparently, it's got something to do with the person being a foreigner who's going to be slaughtered, I think. But whoa, that is really, really weird. Quite horrible, actually. I really liked this little sphinx that was in one of the museums. So I just included that because it was just so cute. There was a lot to do with reproduction in the various places. This first one is basically a hippo being born, and that's kind of lovely, but it's unexpected. The god Min. Very popular. You see Min all over the place. It looks like he's only got one arm, but that's just the position he's holding his body in. It is obvious in some of the statues that he does actually have two arms. You just can't see the other one. So he's got one arm in the air, and the other appendage, which is very visible, is a rather erect one, and that's generally how you see the scenes of Min. Take this for example. It is very obvious to anyone who sees it exactly what it is. It is essentially an ejaculation, and the most interesting aspect of this is the sperm, because the ancient Egyptians weren't supposed to know what sperm looked like because they didn't have a microscope to look at it. And yet there it is again. You see this symbol in a lot of places, and it certainly does seem to be associated with reproduction. This final one is kind of cute because when I first saw it, I thought it very much looked like a game of fetch. So one god is holding a stick that they are about to throw. It looks kind of boomerang shaped. And the other god is looking over their shoulder as if they're about to run and chase it to bring it back to him. And anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and maybe I'll catch you next time.